this is the last set of notes for the evolution classification unit. So just to kind of review last notes and link it to this one, this is an example of adaptive radiation. So adaptive radiation is due to adaptations within a species that over time, these adaptations become so different that they become different species. And causes of adaptive radiation, geographic isolation is a great one. You have all these different islands in Hawaii, so it's not just one island, it's a bunch. And these are a species of bird that they're all related. They all have a common ancestor, but they're all different now because they've each adapted to the island they live on. You can notice this one is a very long curved beak, so does this one. These are for getting, this one particularly is for getting nectar out of long, deep flowers. Same thing with this one. Same thing with this one. They drink nectar. Okay. Some of these bigger beaks, these are seed-eating birds here, down here. This one is an insect-eating bird. It uses that little part of that curved beak to pry stuff out, bugs out of bark and whatnot. And so they become different species over time. Their feather colors are also different because they adapted their colors to be best fit or adapted with their environment to blend in. And a lot of these, particularly the nectar drinking birds, they show the coloration of the flowers in which they eat from. So that gives them some camouflage. So how do we actually look at this? We can look, these are some islands, birds at Hawaiian Islands. They've been studied. We know a lot about them. So how can we look at them except for just putting them up here in a picture? This is where a phylogenetic tree comes in. So if we look over here, you see it kind of looks like a tree. It has a base, like a tree does, has one trunk, and then it comes up and it has branches. Each letter represents a species. So like each of these letters would be one of these birds. And the branches are not just placed haphazardly, they're placed based on how related they are. So if we look, all right, we can look, letter A is the ancestor. It's at the root of the tree. The roots grow first. So the root, this is A is the common ancestor. And then over time, A evolved and branched out into this species here, which we're just using letters just to make it easier to look at instead of names of birds. So this species evolved into species F. Then, but species A still existed. And then a long time later in time, then it branched out into species B and C. C branched off of B because for some reason, here's this species B that lived in a different environment. Maybe it moved to a different island, or the Hawaiian Islands are all mountains. So maybe they moved from the lower part of the mountain to the upper part of the mountain because they were losing the food competition. So they had to move out. And then B branched off into C. A continues up this main trunk here, and A evolves into time. One of A or some of A fly away to a different environment, and they evolve into species B. And then this species D evolves because this is A after it has evolved, and this takes place over millions of years. So A back here existed, and then over time, some of the population left, and they adapted to their new environment. And then another part of the population left and evolved into these two species. And then another part of the population branched off and evolved into E. And then D is what used to be A. But species A itself is no longer alive. Just like over here, the ancestral species here is not any longer alive. But if you compare the DNA against all of these organisms, you can actually work yourself backwards to get to an ancestral species. So we could do that with DNA analysis. That's the part of Darwin's theory of evolution that we have added since the 1980s. So how do you read this chart? Well, which letter or organism is the ancestor of all the others? It's letter A, because A is at the bottom. A didn't die, A evolved into all these other species. Which organisms are now extinct or dead? Okay, well, F is dead because it did not reach all the way to the top. So F is deceased. It evolved, but it still wasn't able to survive, so it died. Which organisms are still alive today? Well, all of these. Anything that reaches the top of the tree is alive. So B, C, D, and E are all alive. Okay, now, you can also tell from a phylogenetic tree which species is more related to another. So which species is most related to B would be C, because they actually are sharing the same branch. So here's one branch, and then there's another one that branched off. Now, how do we know that? Well, you take your finger, or in this case, the cursor, and I go backwards. I start tracing my ancestors, and then I get to this branch here, and that leads me to letter C. Okay. All right. Which organism is most closely related to D? Well, I do the same thing. I take my cursor and I go backwards until I reach a branch right here. So E is D's most closest relative. Okay. Now, normally you would do this here as a formative assessment, and then we would come back together, but of course that can't happen. So we're going to look at tree A first. Which organism is the ancestor? Well, F is at the bottom, so F is the ancestor of everything else. Which species here, which letters are extinct? Well, it's the lines that do not reach the top. A is a dead end, it does not reach the top. And notice F, or E, this is E, it also doesn't reach the top, otherwise it'd be up here. So A and E are extinct. B, C, and D reach the top, so they're alive. Okay, now I made these myself, so that's why, like some students say, well, D's a little bit short. Okay, the EOC is not going to get it's not going to do that to you. That's not the goal of this. So this is just the best that I could draw in what I had, the technology that I had. So B, C, and D are still alive. All right, so if we come over to tree B, A is the ancestor because it's at the bottom where the roots are. F is extinct because its line does not go all the way to the top. B, C, D, and E are all alive because they go to the top. And that is what is here. Now, the only thing we have to do is which organisms are most closely related, A and B or B and C. So is A and B most closely related, or is B and C? Well, they both have the letter B, or species B. So I'm just going to start with B. I'm going to take my cursor and go back, and this is the first branch I come to. So whatever species is near this, is at this branch, is the answer, and that is species C. So B and C branched off right here, so they're most closely related. Okay, over here, B and C, or C and D for tree B. So here I am. This is C. Since C is in both of these, I'm going to start with C. So, excuse me, I go down, trace my finger down from C. This is the first branch. What species branches off? B. So B is the answer. So B and C are most closely related. When you're doing your classwork today, you can go back, of course, and have this note sheet open and look at it to help you out. All right, another way we can look at evolution, and this one is looking, it's looking in a more detailed way. So notice this one just had letters. We could take the letters off and we could put a species name, but you just use letters for right now because that's just our example. Here you replace the letters with names of species: sponges, jellyfish, earthworms, insects, fish, reptiles, and mammals. The characteristics are down here at the bottom. Eukaryotic cells, sense of touch, first heart, have all 5 senses, endoskeleton, which is a skeleton on the inside of the body, amniotic egg, which is an egg like a chicken egg. It's got the egg and the yolk. And then postanal tail, so a tail after your backside. Okay? Now, the way a cladogram works is this diagonal line is called a baseline. This down here shows you how time works. So the low end of the diagonal line is the longest to go. As you move forward on this diagonal line, you are going forward in time. So sponges would be the most ancient or the oldest species living on Earth, and mammals, to which humans, cats and dogs and bears and whatnot we are the youngest species on Earth. So this is your timeline. They're not going to give you the timeline on the key. You're supposed to know that. So you just have to know that. But when you're doing your classwork, you can go back and look at this diagram if you need to. Okay, so the way this works is every organism has all of the traits or characteristics that are found below it on the timeline. So remember, the timeline, this diagonal line is your baseline, and it moves, as it goes up, it moves forward in time. So sponges have eukaryotic cells, but sponges cannot sense touch. Sponges do not have a heart. In fact, sponges have none of the 5 senses. So because all of these traits evolved, this point in time is when sponges evolved. They do not have any trait that is higher than them on the timeline because they evolved before those traits. Okay, so if we look at what a fish has every trait below it. So a fish has an endoskeleton. It has senses, it has a heart, it can sense touch, and it has eukaryotic cells. A fish will not have any of the traits that go above it. So they will not have any of the traits above it. So none of this and none of that. Okay. So let's take a look. These are your directions that I have just verbally explained, in case you forget. Now, questions that the EOC will ask. Which characteristics or characteristic does a sponge have? Well, remember, sponges have every characteristic below them. So here's the sponges. The only characteristic that's below is eukaryotic cells. So that's all they have. All right. 2, which organism is the first to have, these are your 5 senses. So if I go and look at my 5 senses, taste, touch, smell, hearing, then I look at this, so here's my cursor, and I just move forward in time, and the first species I come to, or group of organisms, it's not a species, group, is insects, and that's the answer. Okay. Number 3, which organism is the most advanced on the cladogram? Well, the most advanced is at the top. So which organism is up here at the top? Mammals. Okay. Which characteristics do earthworms have? Earthworms. Here are earthworms. So they have every trait that is below them. So remember, the lower end of the timeline is below. So earthworms have a heart. It is very primitive. It is just a blood vessel that beeps. or excuse me, that beats, but nonetheless, that's all it is. They have a heart. They can sense touch. If you poke an earthworm, it's going to feel that and try to move away from you. And they have eukaryotic cells. So earthworms have all the traits that are below them. Okay. What characteristic does a reptile have that a fish are missing? So reptiles that fish don't have. Well, look for the traits in between them. So what does a fish have? A reptile have that a fish doesn't? And the answer is this trait right here, which is called an amniotic egg. And so reptiles lay an egg like birds do, except the reptile eggs, they have leather around the outside and they don't sit on their eggs, whereas birds do. Okay. Now, do you even have to know what all these things are? You may not know what an amniotic egg is. It doesn't matter. You can still answer the question. Okay? You can still answer the question. Okay? All right, now the last thing is a dichotomous key. Okay, a dichotomous key. Di means two. So the questions are always in groups of two. Okay, so here they are. Here's one set of questions. Here's another set of questions. There's 4 sets of questions here. The answer to the questions is always either yes or no. If you get 2 no's in a set, then you did something wrong. Okay? So, you always begin the key at question 1. You always do. Okay? So it doesn't matter. Even if you're looking at snowman number 3, you're still going to begin at question 1. So here's 1. If I'm looking at snowman number 4, I'm still going to be looking at number 1. If you're looking at to find the name of snowman 5, you're going to start with question 1 each time. Okay? So if both answers are no, you've made a mistake and you have to go back and start again. Okay? So you're going to continue using the key until you find the answer or the name of an organism. Okay? So we use a dichotomous key to find the names of organisms. And yes, you have to know a good bit about the organisms themselves to find the key. Okay, to use the key. So you kind of have to know what these are. So let's find the name of number 1. Okay, and I actually had all the names in here and they disappeared. All right, so number 1, you're gonna number 1, you have to look. This number 1 deals with a hat. You have a striped top hat and a triangular hat. All right, take a look. Now, this key, I made this myself, but notice how in all keys, they try to trick you. This is a triangular hat, but it is striped to try to confuse you. That's what a key is going to do, especially for the biology EOC. So this is a triangular hat, though it be striped. So what do I do? Well, the snowman has here it is, triangular hat. So I'm going to do what the key says, and it says go to 4A. So I'm going to go all the way down to 4A, and I'm going to look, does this snowman have a rectangular or a pointy nose? So here it is right here. This is a rectangular nose. Okay, so 4A, he has a rectangular nose, so I do what the key tells me. I'm going to go to 5A. Okay, so is this snowman wearing a checkered or a spotted vest? Is it a checkered or a spotted vest? So this is a checkered vest. Okay, so the name of this snowman is Checkers. Okay, so snowman number 1 is Checkers. All right, let's try to find the name of snowman number 2. Let's look at, we always start with number 1. Does he have a striped top hat or a triangular hat? This snowman has a triangular hat, so I'm going to skip down to 4A. Does he have a rectangular nose or a pointy nose? Well, that is definitely a point. So this is a pointy nose. So he has a pointy nose, so this snowman's name is Rudolph. Rudolph the snowman. Okay, so number 2, his name is Rudolph. Number 3, start back at question number 1 each time. Does this snowman have a striped top hat or a triangular hat? Well, that is definitely not a triangular hat. So this must be a striped top hat. So striped top hat, I'm going to do what the key tells me. Go to 2A. Are his eyes black in color, or does he have hollow circles? Yeah, those look like hollow circles to me. So go to 3A. Does the body have circular buttons or triangular buttons? They're circular buttons. So this is Frosty the snowman. So Frosty the snowman, Rudolph the snowman, and Checkers the snowman. All right, number 4. And you can pause the video here if you want to find out number 4 for yourself. Number 4, he has a triangular hat. So I'm going to skip all the way down to 4. Does he have a rectangular or pointy nose? Well, right here, that is definitely rectangular. So he's got a rectangular nose. Go to 5A. Is he wearing a checkered or a spotted vest? His vest is spotted. So this is party animal. Yep, this is party animal. Now, if you go through this key at any time and you get the same answer twice, you did something wrong. You can never get the same answer twice. Okay? All right, we got one more snowman left, but there's 2 names in the chart, so we're going to have to do it. All right, he does have a striped top hat, so we're going to go to 2A. Are his eyes black or are they hollow circles? They're hollow circles. So I'm going to go to 3. Does he have circular or triangular buttons? He's got triangular buttons, so this is Iceman. Okay. So we got Checkers, Rudolph, Frosty, Party Animal, and Iceman. So that's how we use the dichotomous key. Okay. So you'll have classwork where you're going to have some things to practice here, and then go ahead and work at the classwork. I would have the notes available in front of me so that you can toggle back and forth.